Good morning. So I haven't done a video on TradingView before, but I'm going to try this out, see how it goes. So I have obviously a lot of colors, and you probably don't need me covering up the chart this whole time. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn that off. But so I have a lot of, bright colors on this chart, and I think that can confuse a lot of folks, especially since they're not the ones who drew these. So I wanted to take some time and explain exactly what it is that I'm looking at. Because first of all, I did not place all of these individual lines here. I think that's probably the first assumption most people make if they're not familiar with fib channels or how they work. Like, I did not draw all of these. I didn't spend my time on that. I actually only had to choose 3 points for each of these sets of rainbow lines. So I'm going to show you how all of those work. And so this set right here, I'll show and hide it so you know which one I'm talking about. That one is called September on my object tree. It is just using the price action from September 5th to September 25th, essentially, to govern what it is looking at. And then it kind of goes back, and it more or less can describe some of the channels that price stayed in, going all the way back to the Project We bond offering, which is kind of neat. But now, obviously, here in October, it's moved out of that channel, and it's still, price action is still respecting several of these other lines that I've already got here, and those are lines that I have not touched in a long time. And the September one is just one that I obviously placed here no later than the 25th. So this has been here for a week or two at this point. But other than that, this is a chart that I really just don't edit much. The lines on fib channels don't have to be adjusted much, if at all. And to make this a little bit easier, I'm just turning extended hours off. And at this point, one thing I might consider doing, just to make it a little bit easier on myself, is edit the September fib channel just to see what else we can show, see what else it can describe. So if I wanted to, instead of having it go to this swing low coming out of that climb out of September, have it come here to yesterday's low. We don't know if that's the low on this move down, but it could be. And this previous high that it was on, we could leave it there. We could move it to the next swing high, and we can see what that looks like. And I know that there are a lot of lines on this chart, and I'll move to a cleaner one here in a second. But I could also put this on like an intermediate low in between if I wanted to see how that looks. It's not bad. So it just depends on how much space I want between the lines, how much I want it to, how much granularity I want between my fib levels. So I don't know. I'll see how I like that. See how it develops, and I can always adjust my points if I want to. But anyway, let's go to a fresh chart. And all of these objects in the object tree are just global items. So I'll just spend a second showing you what they are. So this is going all the way back to IPO. This is the entire chart. Like, if I make a brand new GameStop chart, this is what it would look like right now, just because of the global things that are not hidden right now out of what I have currently shown. The first is, and importantly, this is a chart that is not adjusted for dividends. So the low here in 2023 shows up at 93 cents. If I adjust for dividends, then the low in 2023 shows up at 63 cents. And this trend line that I drew at the 2007 previous all-time high, to date at that point, does not intersect with it anymore because of the way that trend lines are drawn on the chart. So because the trend line is anchored to the price point that you draw it at, and so this one is actually like that's where the non-dividend adjusted price was at that point. But GameStop paid dividends back then, or at least starting in like 2012, according to the data shown here. So if you adjust your chart for dividends, the all-time low actually was in 2003, and what we now refer to as the all-time low in 2020 was only about a cent above that. So not adjusted for dividends, the low in 2020 actually was the all-time low. Excuse me. So that's just a little bit of context on what we're looking at. So for now, I'm going to leave the chart in a not adjusted for dividends state, and just show you a few things there. So these other lines are just basically from major tops and bottoms. So we've got the deep value trend line here going from the all-time low in 2020 to the low of 2024. This green one here is going from the all-time high in 2021 to this point in March 2023, where I can, like, it was like the island going on here. Like this major gap up was where I decided to place the second point, and that it ended up actually governing where this island reversal sort of action was going on. So it actually intersected with that again, came up, tapped it, and then gapped above it again, like months later, over almost a year later. So just some kind of interesting things about that. But this isn't a video just about trend lines, it's about fib channels. So I'm just giving you a little bit of context on why these lines are there. This is from the high of 2024 intraday. The red one above it is from the pre-market high. So if I switch to 24 hours and turn on extended, then you can see there's the wick, and the intersecting point is actually 1 year later. So you can actually see it's exactly 1 year later. So you on anything smaller than or larger than like the 4-hour chart, it's exactly 1 year between these. So this shows up as a 4 a.m. candle on the 24-hour chart, and it would be the, I think, 8 a.m. candle on the 4-hour chart for May 14th of 24 and 25. So that is just kind of an interesting thing to note about those. And then this one is just the December 26th resistance against the May 14th high. So that's just a little bit of context to paint against why I have these major support and resistance lines here. I have the Gandalf line because obviously, I mean, for anyone who hasn't seen it, this is why it's the Gandalf line. So that was when we had the low coming off of the high in 2024, had fairly significant volume. I mean, that entire period, but it was pretty good volume coming off of that bottom. And then anytime it's come back down to that line, which has been somewhere around like the 20-month moving average, it's been met with significant accumulation. And you can also see that here on the volume shelf here. I mean, that is where we have seen the most volume in this period. So even as I scroll to the right, I mean, that's where the battle's been. So I've been calling that the Gandalf line for the last couple of weeks. I mean, it was just like another support line for a while, but I just decided to change the name of it. So that's why it's got a name. Anyway, let's move on. Fib channels. So I'm going to turn extended hours off just so that I have less chart to work with. And let's use the Gandalf line to show fib channels. So the way fib channels work is they use Fibonacci levels just like fib retracements and fib extensions do. And like in this Fibonacci menu, you have tons of tools that use Fibonacci levels, but just in different visual ways. So these all use the same math, but they visualize it in different ways. Like you get GAN boxes and fib spirals. So like trend-based fib times are cool. Like, I mean, you can go swing low, swing high, swing low again, and you can actually see some sort of interesting things about the way that price action sometimes changes the shape in certain periods. But trend-based fib times are just very tricky because they don't really give you much to work with in terms of predictions on how anything's going to work, but I find them mathematically interesting. But as far as fib channels go, let's just show you an example. And also I want to point out, like, you can draw just like a fib extension or fib retracement. You can draw them in the up or the down direction. So if I put two swings high and a swing low, then my fib channel will be going in the down direction. But if I put my first 2 points down low, and I'm going to use the same points that I did to draw the Gandalf line. So that was May 24th of 2024, and then March 31st, 2025 for the bottoms. And then now, since I have the magnet tool turned on, I definitely recommend this. Use the strong magnet. We can actually see it snapping to points as we go. For those who aren't super familiar, like if I have the magnet turned off, then as I move my mouse around, it's just not going to snap to anything. But if I have the magnet on, then it clings to data points as I go. So so let's just start with an extreme. If I choose the high point between those, and to be clear, I don't even have to choose a point in between them. I could go behind them if I wanted to. I need to zoom in a little bit to get better resolution. Yeah, I could go behind them if I wanted to. It's a little unusual to do that, but you can technically. So because these go off sort of to infinity, if you have them extended left, extended right, you can, I mean, all you're really doing is you're choosing the trend line's degree, like where it goes parallel based on your first 2 points, and then you're choosing how high does your one fib extension go based on your third point. So that's really what a fib channel is. So all this is it's drawing a bunch of parallel lines based on your first 2 points, and then your third point tells you how far apart they should all be. But they're all going to be parallel no matter what, based on the first trend line that you draw. And so that's why this is overlapping with the Gandalf line. And so if I use this this intraday high from May 14th, 2024, then this does a pretty good job of telling me when we're going to meet significant resistance. And I can even switch to like a daily chart here to. Oh, I'm going to have to change visibility on that. There we go. Yeah. So you can get a little bit of a picture there, but I lose some granularity here because we just haven't had much price discovery here, right? So it might tell me a little bit about if we ever get out of this box, what to expect in terms of resistance. But if I want a little bit more information, then I probably need to choose a point lower, and then I can get a little bit better granularity on resistance and support. And so you can actually see where some of these channels have formed over the last year and a half. And just you can kind of play with the placement of this, and if it's too narrow, then it really doesn't tell you a whole lot unless you're on a really small time frame. But the smaller your time frame, the more meaningful it might get. And so you notice, like I placed that really low, but this is still intersecting. Like we're still finding support on some of these lines. Now it's not going to intersect with like all of them, but that's just to illustrate a point that you will find meaning in these lines if you place them in the correct spot. And it's just because price is fractal in nature, in that patterns are repeating and Fibonacci is everywhere. So like math is your friend here, but you don't have to do the math. You just can use tools that will help you. So I'm going to place my one fib extension where I had a significant resistance line intersecting with a trend line there. So I'm going to go ahead and lock the fib channel just to make sure I don't accidentally move it. And we'll just kind of take a look here. And so I'm going to just switch to like a 4-hour chart to get a little bit better granularity than the day. And we'll just kind of scroll through here, and you can see where channels are forming on price as we go. And even right here before the convertible bond announcement in June, it tapped a fib level before gapping down 2 levels below it. And then it did a perfect tap of that Gandalf line again after having basically formed it on the prior convertible bond offering. And then, oh, by the way, this ray here is from the Push Start Arcade announcement. So there was like a double bottom there. So I forgot to mention that line because I didn't even see it there, honestly. But so that's why that one is there. So yeah, so I like the placement of this one, but let me just get into why stuff like this matters. And so now, like I'm on the monthly chart just so that I can get back to the IPO quickly. So we're back to the beginning. And oh, hey, look at that! I see lines. Are they going to matter? Well, looky here. Like I've shown you a chart that was completely blank before this, so we're still on the same chart. This is still that same fib channel. Like if you want, I can go back to it. Like this is it. I will even name it test fib channel, no, demo Fib channel. There we go. We'll go back just to prove there's no funny business here. Go to the 4-hour chart. Demo Fib channel. It's the same thing. And I just went back to 2002. And this is not adjusted for dividends. So what happens if I adjust for dividends? So we're going to do that. All right, now we're adjusted for dividends. Now what's it look like? And this isn't going to describe all price action because it's, it's only describing like a section of the chart. But I want you to take a look and see, like, look at where significant areas of support and resistance are met. And like, tell me that's not magic, that we just time traveled. And so, like, we had to get all the way to, what, 2017 before it finally exited the Fib channel. Like, it peaked out over it at the first all-time high in 2007. Oh, that's interesting. An all-time high. Make note of that. So it first dipped out of the Fib channel, like just barely in 2016, and then finally fell out of it in 2017. Made this enormous cup. Had that time-based double bottom off of the support resistance trend line from the first all-time high. And then this same Fib channel where the top line, the 4.618, the 4.618 Fib intersected with the 2007 all-time high. More or less. I mean, we're talking cents here. Intersected with the all-time high in 2021. And that is the magic of Fib channels. And I drew that based on price action from a section of price just from May of 2024 to March 2025, when price was range bound between $17.70 and, in that time frame, about $48. Yeah, the high was 48 there. But I used price points of 1770, 2073, and 3437. And we have just successfully described all of the price action for the entire ticker history, with the exception of this period, this dip before the rip, and this dip before the rip. So something to consider, I suppose. But I guess if you really want to get curious, you could extrapolate and follow where that 4.618 line goes, depending on where the next rip comes. Because, like I said, price is fractal in nature. Things like history repeats itself. It's just a question of when, not if. I'm not making any specific predictions on when or how that's going to happen. I know it will happen. But I mean, the chart just doesn't lie here. And let me show you another example. So here we are, still adjusted for dividends on the monthly, I'm going to do another fib channel. This one's real simple. Low, low. And then we can choose the all-time high, previous all-time high in 2007, or I can go to that low in between. I kind of like the low in between. And now if I switch to like a weekly, I'm going to rename that fib channel all-time lows and make it visible on the weekly chart. And I'm going to make the lines thicker so that if they are on the same, if they wind up on the same screen, depending on our time frame view, then we'll be able to distinguish it from the first fib channel that we drew, even though like the other one won't be mostly flat. So this is an all-time fib channel. I mean, it was drawn over what, like a 17-year period. So this is based on monthly price action, and you can see, and if you know anything about Fibonacci levels and how those work, then what gets really interesting is that when you've got like this 618 and 786 fib level here, we've got, it gets pushed down and then shoots up, meets this one resistance again, ping pongs a little bit between these, a little bit here, and then we get a significant move up, come through here, shoots up, hits the, what is that, the 3? I have to like scroll so far to the right. It's actually the 3.618. Hits the 3.618 fib, comes back tests the 2 Fibonacci level, and then I may actually want to put additional, yeah, there's like the 3.414 was another one of these resistance levels in here. Yeah, and the 2.414 was about where the Gandalf line was formed. So just some kind of interesting things here, because like you have some like sort of default Fibonacci levels that show up, and then you can choose to add some of your own. You can even customize these numbers if you want. You don't have to use the ones that are suggested. It's all math, but the point I want to drive home here is that when we start to get a little bit more granular here, and this is why I have lots of crayons on my chart, and it's why the more history you get on the chart and the more it stays in a box, the more complex it gets. But if we ever get out of the box, the price discovery will be interesting, to say the least. But we have some intersections here between these fib channels, and it just starts to put a little color on, sorry, no pun intended, it explains a lot when you start to look at the historical context, because these are time-based support and resistance lines that when you tilt the chart on its axis, you can really understand what it is that you're looking at. So yeah, I mean, I get a lot of probably justified criticism when I share some of my charts, because they may not have a ton of context, or have just several overlapping fib channels, and if you're not the one who placed them there, then you're like, I don't know what I'm looking at. But if you watch this video from the beginning, then you know that there's only 2 fib channels on this chart, plus some trend lines that I had on there to start with. It's a fairly clean chart, but there's a lot of information on it, and you can do some things with that. And so right now, this price action that we're seeing on GameStop, if you want to know, sorry, it's a little challenging to scroll with that auto axis. So the level we're at right now is going to be the 2.618 is what it's hovering around right now, this red line, just below that $26 level where price is right now. So the 2.618 is about where it is right now. The 2.414 is what it's above. And this sort of cyan colored line above it is the 3. And on my other chart, I have a white line called Call Me Warren Buffett at $32. But of course, we have all sorts of other meaningful lines that could be drawn, and I have drawn and decided to hide or show at certain times. Things like the convertible bond conversion prices for Project Rocket and Project Wii, and the trigger prices for where they become convertible, things like that. So there are plenty of things to be on the lookout for, but just from a technical point of view, I think this is really telling, because you can get all sorts of information just from price and volume. And the reason I call this the Gandalf line is because look at the volume when it's gotten down to the Gandalf line. I mean, you've gotten a volume spike anytime it's gotten near it, and that has been a violent rejection. It's been a pretty strong move off of it for the most part. Kind of traded sideways near it here. This is, I think, just indicative of the macro conditions, everyone being very tentative and waiting. Also, a little bit of suppression going into earnings. So a lot of different things going on here. Just straight trading sideways going into earnings, which were obviously very strong. But yeah, that's what I got to say about GameStop and fib channels, and I hope this was helpful and educational. And I still think that the Gandalf line means that it's not going to get pushed below that. But I will say that if I'm wrong about that and it does get pushed below it, that it will be an extremely violent amount of volume that comes in there, and that dip will be bought aggressively. So that's kind of how my thoughts are on that. And I had previously been looking at September 20th as the kind of line in the sand because of the 4.6 million share order that came in there. Because I mean, it was like a magnetic polar opposite type of reaction. Like, price has not been able to get anywhere near that ever since. And that is true. But this line here takes time into account. And so I think that's just a more complete view of what is essentially the same view, but it's not anchoring it to just the price itself, but the concept of time. So that's sort of my philosophy. So thanks for coming to my TED Talk.